Welcome back to the Own It podcast. This is part 2. Last week we spoke with Wayne, who's a buyer's agent, about purchasing investment properties, especially if you're a first-time investor or you're considering kind of expanding on that portfolio. Wayne's back. He hasn't been in the house for a week. We're filming this at the same time, but the episodes are staggered a week between. You haven't been sitting the whole time, have you, mate? No. But we will chuck in a disclaimer because we legally have to. This podcast is for general information only and does not constitute financial or investment advice. Always seek professional advice before making property investment decisions. Views expressed are our own and not those that are affiliated with any organizations. Now that we've got that out of the way. In the last episode, we kind of spoke about rent vesting, maybe some kind of basics in and around it. And we kind of can discuss a little bit further some more common questions that buyers ask. Probably one of the biggest things that people will be listening for is, hey, like, what's some mistakes I could make? Like, where can I go wrong? Because you can go wrong. But what's a common mistake first-time investors make?
There's a few. People tend to, especially first-time investors, they listen to family and so forth, and they tend to buy just around the corner from where they live.
Yep.
Because they can drive past it, check it out, and so forth. Well, if it's not in the right part of the cycle, that's no good.
Correct.
And so
it's very unlikely someone's going to live right next to a great spot to invest. Like, the chances of that happening when you think maybe, hey, there could be 50 suburbs that are good to invest in at the moment, the likelihood you live in that suburb is pretty low. Yeah.
Correct. And within Melbourne, like people are talking at the moment, Melbourne's bottomed out and ready to start to turn up. But there are some suburbs that are still stagnant and will continue to be for a few more months, and some that are starting to boom now. So even within the city, if you want to stay in the same city, don't look in your backyard. Look wider than that.
Yeah.
And another mistake.
I think you should also always consider all options. Like, I always say that to buyers. Like, they go, oh, I want to stay in Melbourne. It's like, okay, but even if you feel like that's where you want to be, it's still good to consider all your options. And if you still stay with Melbourne, then that's fine. But at least you're making an educated decision rather than just blocking out every other option available.
And that's why they should do some research. There's reasons why certain areas are booming or on the upswing in the cycle and the downswing in the cycle. They need to do research, talk to people in the know, and get a better understanding of markets. And a lot of people are time poor. They won't have time to do all that research. So you really need to engage someone who does that for a living and will help you and has your best interests at heart. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah.
Another mistake first-time investors make is buying off the plan.
Yep.
Whether that be house and land. Now, if that's all they can afford to do and they want to live in that area, no problem. But we're talking about investment.
We're talking about making the best decision to give yourself the best growth or best, whatever it is to grow their long-term position. And again, like, just as it's very unlikely that your backyard will be the best spot to invest in, it's just as unlikely that if you're going to go buy somewhere, that's also going to be the best spot to invest in. And as we spoke on the last episode last week, and if you haven't heard it, we'd recommend listening to it. House and land packages are the best of the rest. And so again, like, you're not purchasing something that has a history, and you're purchasing something that could be good, but it could be bad. Now, if you're living in that doesn't necessarily matter as much. If you're going to be there for 10, 15 years and you love it and that's really important to you, by all means, if that's what you want to do what you want to do. But we are talking about buying an investment property. And I feel like people can get emotional when we're like, hey, that's probably a mistake. And they go, oh, well, that's what I did. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're planning to live there. We're talking about making the best investment decision at any given time.
Spot on. And some of those greenfield areas aren't the spots to buy.
Yeah.
Some are okay, but most aren't, because land isn't scarce.
Yep.
The other thing I'd stay away from is certainly buying off the plan for apartments.
Yep.
That's just fraught with danger.
I'm currently jumping into today's episode just to ask a massive favor. If you could please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, we would greatly appreciate it. Now, back to today's episode.
So another thing, buying off the plan, apartments in particular, and house and land packages, you sign a contract but there's no guarantees that that contract will stay the same. They can blow out.
Yeah.
You do a variation. There's usually a fee, and then there's a builder's margin on top of that.
Of course.
It doesn't include landscaping in many aspects. It doesn't include window coverings. With apartments in particular, you'll see this nice shiny brochure. And so this is what the apartment will look like at the end of the development, only to see the end product and it looks nothing like it.
Spot on.
That happens all the time. And the value of that property is a lot less than what you thought it would be.
Spot on. And, often you talk to people that buy apartments. It's like, why did you buy that brand new apartment? Especially Dockland apartments, for example, that have gone down massively in price. And they go, oh, because I wanted it to be new. I wanted it to be nice. And they get caught up on it being shiny and having the latest appliances and a pool and a gym and all these sorts of things. And they don't actually factor in what is, I guess, driving the growth in that apartment, if there is anything at all, right? And they get so caught up on all these, fancy things that they make a bad decision because it looked like an attractive offer. And I think this is even going to become more of a concern when it comes to first home buyers, with Labor pushing 100,000 new builds, which will most likely be CBD apartments or building in the greenfields, because the cost of building is too high to do anything in sort of blue chip residential suburbs that are already established. So it's going to be CBD, or it's going to be greenfields, which, as we've spoken about, can carry high risk. I mean, one of the other questions I've got coming in that I know first time buyers will be asking, like new, established, obviously we've spoken about it, like what sort of era on a property could you consider purchasing?
So new, I think I've pretty much
covered
made
that.
It clear that I don't like new.
Yeah.
That's not to say everyone would agree with that.
Yeah.
Some people would like nice and new and shiny. But I would look at, especially when we're talking first-time investor, I would look at something less than 20 years old. You get depreciation on a building for up to 40 years.
Yep.
So if you buy something, say, 15 years old, it's still modern, it's still low maintenance, but you've still got 25 years worth of depreciation on that. It depends what entity you buy the property in, but in your own name or a trust, you've got depreciation and tax advantages.
Yeah. And if you're a first-time investor, you probably also don't want to go buy interstate, something that requires a lot of work. Then all of a sudden you're going to have to manage that, like new carpets, paint, lights, appliances, maybe kitchen or bathroom renovation. That's a lot to take on for someone that hasn't done it before. So, maybe if you've got this team or people maybe you could consider that. But for the everyday first-time investor, probably getting something that's a bit more set and forget's probably what you're thinking would be the best answer.
And as I mentioned last episode, it's you want to sleep at nights.
Yep.
So good property manager, vital. Good tenant, low maintenance property, reasonably new, and by that I mean sort of less than 15 years old. Set and forget.
Yep. And that can change if it's your second, third, fourth, 10th, 15th property. You might take on more risk, less risk, but you're in a different position. And this is what we're talking about. Everyone's always in different positions at different times to make a decision. Like I know one of the questions I've got later on is like, oh, what would $700,000 buy you at the moment, or what's a good spot? But that's going to depend. We'll get to that in a moment. When it comes to buying an investment property, it's so different to an owner-occupier where there's so much emotion involved. Should an investor have any level of emotion? Is emotion bad, good? Like, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. So the short answer is no emotion at all. However, we all have a little bit of pride, and we all would like to buy in an area that, if we're telling our friends we've got an investment property, you sort of want to be semi-proud of course, of that area. So the answer is no emotion, but there will always be a little bit.
Yeah.
As long as you've got great capital growth drivers and really good yield. You've got to have those things. Otherwise, it's pointless having it.
Yeah.
So buying down at Sorrento could be a wonderful investment, but you're not going to get the yield.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we talk about. Emotion can also lead to, as we've spoken about in this episode and previous episodes, emotion of, hey, this apartment's nice and new and fancy. That emotion is what catches those buyers out. So you just have to be really mindful. It's different from looking for an owner-occupier property where it's all about emotion and where you want to be. Investor, it's all about numbers and growth factors that you have to consider. What's like a no-go strategy at the moment that maybe investors are using that you're like, oh, maybe I wouldn't recommend doing that? Have you seen something out there at the moment that someone's doing? You're like, oh.
So taking on too much.
Yep.
So picking a property with, say, a large land parcel,
Mhm.
and then they decide, hey, I want to subdivide it.
Yeah.
I want to put a couple of units on the back of it or something like that. If you're not experienced, don't play in that space. If you're experienced, go for it, because that is a great way to get quick growth.
Yeah. Because you've done, like, this wasn't a question we had written down, but you've done development before.
Yep.
And, like, if you don't mind me asking, like, how many properties before did you buy before you considered that option?
Yeah, so I was probably up to about 8
Yeah.
before I sort of went down that path, and then started. I set up a little company, a development company. Bought an old house, pretty much derelict.
Yep.
Went and got my plans and permits and so forth. But it's a 2-year process from start, getting your plans and permits. And I wasn't overly experienced, obviously, when I was doing my first development.
Yep.
A couple of years later, it's all finished. A lot of grey hair. Didn't have grey hair before I started. And the first development panned out okay.
Yep.
But a little bit of that was dumb luck, I think.
Yeah.
You know, yes, timing. So that was Melbourne, suburb of Melbourne. Melbourne was booming. Had I not done the development, would I have made money if I'd just bought a couple of passive investments? Probably would have done just as well without the headaches.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and that was your 8th property. So it's like, if you're a first-time buyer, first-time investor client, probably you shouldn't be aiming to take that on, if that makes sense. Like, that's something that you'd bought multiple times before you felt like you were comfortable with the buying process. It meant that you could just allocate time to more that development side of things, rather than, as you said, like, creating even more headaches for yourself.
Spot on.
Yeah.
And your first 2 or 3, passive and accumulate.
Yeah.
That's in 2 words.
Yeah. Yeah. The question that I've been kind of waiting to the end to ask, because I feel like $700,000 probably a pretty common budget for an investment property. It's what a lot of first-time investors will come, 5, 6, 700. If you had access to, and I should also disclaim with this question, this isn't advice for everyone. This is advice, to maybe one person. Well, it's actually not advice at all because of the disclaimer I put out there. But, this isn't for everyone. Everyone's circumstances are different. So it could be different for each individual investor. But if you had access to $700,000, you don't have any previous property purchases, what would you consider buying at the moment? Yeah. Mid 2025?
Yeah, great question. And that's probably a question that most of my investor clients come to me with.
I'm on a discovery call with you, mate. Yeah,
exactly. So I would think, 650 to 700 is a real sweet spot for certain areas. So say regional Queensland, Cairns, Mackay, booming at the moment. They're well into their growth cycle, but not near the top yet.
Yep.
So I think the growth cycle is probably around 4 years, give or take, because no one really knows. But I think they're about 2 years into it. I reckon there's probably 2 years left or more. But 650 to 700 gets you probably $700 a week rent.
Yep.
Great cash flow.
Yep.
And the growth drivers in those areas are fantastic. Lots of infrastructure going up there, lots of industry. Cairns, for example, used to be a tourist town.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
There's lots happening, lots of industry moving there as well. So you think about it, so 650, getting up to $700 a week rent. So those 2 locations are fantastic. I'm seeing a lot of value in Melbourne.
Yeah.
I think Melbourne's at the bottom of its cycle, pockets of, 650 probably would get you in these locations. I'll name a couple. Craigieburn I like.
It's also important, like, when we talk about suburbs, one suburb might be good. Like, I know, for example, Craigieburn could be a good spot at the moment to go, but you could go in 2 suburbs to the left or the right, up or down, and that could be not so good.
100%.
So each suburb is so different from, the suburb next to it. Like, it can, there can be so much variables that you need to consider, so many external factors as well.
Totally. But I like that. So the Hume corridor I quite like, and the northeast. So, you Epping, Mill Park, Bundoora, those sorts of areas. I quite like those areas. And the yields are reasonably good. You're getting up to 4.5% yield.
And I feel like what I'm seeing from a lot of owner occupiers in that northern corridor, for example, is that the value is good. The value proposition is great compared to if you go to the east. you can be 20 minutes closer in and get the equivalent property in the north sometimes. So a lot of professional couples are buying owner-occupier properties, and that's also helping with the growth of the market. I feel like that's what I'm seeing from clients that are coming to me and what we're purchasing for them as well. So you're buying maybe let's say like a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, maybe, 10, 20, 30-year-old property in kind of those pockets.
Yeah.
What do you think that would get per week?
So you're probably around the 550, 600 per week. But like the northern Queensland that I mentioned before, you're getting 4-bedroom, 12, 14, 13-year-old homes.
Yep.
And awesome rent.
Yep.
Up to 6% yield.
Yep.
So you buy there, you get a good couple of years growth. Let's say you got 17, 18% per annum.
Yep.
Not unheard of during boom times.
Yep.
There's potentially 35%.
Yep.
There's your deposit for your next property within 2 years.
Yeah.
And I've had clients that have done that. Clients that I've bought in Brisbane for, Perth, but I'm sort of steering away from the capital city of Perth. I think it's getting a little bit toppy.
Yep.
Brisbane, probably a little bit longer, but the yields aren't quite there now.
Yep.
Regional Queensland, yes. Regional WA, still pretty good, but again, getting close. And Melbourne's the one.
And I feel like, again, that's what we really started episode 1 with, was that, talking about rent vesting, or someone that can't afford to maybe get into the home they want will consider renting for a while, invest their money somewhere else. Like if you invested your money in, Queensland, for example, and you got that 35% return, that gives you the opportunity to get into your own occupier, maybe in the area you want to be, or as you said, take that money out and put it somewhere else. And this is where I think the information around rent vesting is becoming more available and more people are understanding the strategy behind it, and they're actually seeing value with it. It always comes down to everyone's individual position on what they want to do, and if they want to live in where they want to buy, or if they want to consider buying an investment property. So that's always an individual decision, but I feel like giving people a bit of information on investments at least allows them to make a fully educated decision. And that's why I wanted to get you on for these last couple of episodes. Mate, really appreciate your time. We look forward to putting this out to everyone. And if we can help anyone purchase an investment property or consider purchasing, we'd love you to reach out.